Let's take a few moments to generate a really positive, altruistic intention or motivation as our reason for being here in this session. So, for the last few days, we have been looking at different kinds of internal dangers, afflictive emotions in our mind, like jealousy and anger and so forth. There's quite a bit of talk about these in Buddhism, and it can be quite painful when we observe our own minds and we see that we have these afflictive emotions in our minds. This can give rise to feelings of shame, even self-criticalness or self-hatred. So that's not helpful. The Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, Tara, for example, they don't feel aversion for us for having these disturbing emotions. They know we can't help it. It's just because we haven't managed to overcome ignorance and these other afflictive emotions. And they're completely compassionate and understanding and forgiving and accepting of us as we are and dedicated to helping us become free of these disturbing emotions. They know we can do it. And they're totally there for us all the time, supporting us, helping us, guiding us to be free of these disturbing emotions. So it's really important to have a sense of compassion for ourselves, kindness for ourselves, and confidence that we can do it. We can change ourselves, improve ourselves, and get beyond these disturbing emotions. And it's also helpful to remember we're not the only person in the world who has them. Everyone does, to greater or lesser degrees. So realizing that can open our heart with compassion to others and reinforce our wish, our determination to help others as much as we can. So let's think that we're here this afternoon listening to this talk, discussing and so on, so that we can work on transforming our own minds, freeing ourselves from our disturbing emotions, which are so painful, and then being able to help others to do the same, so that we can all develop our potential for enlightenment, our Buddha nature. So for the last few days, we've been going through this kind of prayer or set of verses about the 8 fears, the 8 dangers. And there's external forms of these, also internal forms. The main ones are the internal ones, the afflictive emotions, like anger, jealousy, and so on. These actually cause more harm than the external ones. You know, we tend to be really scared about, well, we don't have lions around here, but, you know, whatever kind of dangers. Huh? We have cougars, yeah, mountain lions around here, and bears, but I think they keep their distance from us. But, you know, there are dangers in the world that we tend to be afraid of. But actually, in Shantideva's text, in an earlier chapter, he talks about the afflictive emotions, the delusions, and how they're more harmful, more dangerous to us than external enemies. So this, let's see, chapter 4, which is about conscientiousness. There he talks about all the defects, the disadvantages, the harmfulness of our disturbing emotions. And he says, Should even all the gods and demigods rise up against me as my enemies, they could not lead nor place me in the roaring fires of deepest hell. Yet the mighty foe, these disturbing conceptions, in a moment can cast me amidst those flames, which, when met, will cause not even the ashes of the king of mountains to remain. So that sounds pretty heavy, but the point is that the worst that other outside external harms could do, whether they're human or animal or natural disasters like earthquakes and so on, the worst that they could do to us would be to kill us, which is bad, of course, but that's just, losing our life. But they can't cause us to go to unfortunate rebirths, like in Buddhism. The Buddha spoke about different kinds of, different realms that we could be born in our next life and future lives. And some of these are really horrible, like hells, being born as a hungry ghost, even being born as an animal. So much suffering. So nobody outside of ourselves can cause us to go to those realms and have those experiences. But our own internal enemies, the disturbing emotions like anger, attachment, jealousy, and so forth, those can cause us to have such rebirths and then suffer for a long time to come. So that's why, those are the main things to be wary of and request Tara to help us, to protect us from. And again, she can't take those away from us, but by making a connection with Tara and deeply understanding who she is and what she has in her mind, she has the realization of emptiness and all other positive qualities, compassion and love and so on. Her mind is like fully opened, fully awakened, fully perfect and pure. And she accomplished that on her own. And she's there to teach us and guide us and help us to do the same. So by remembering her and relying upon her, that itself can give us help and inspiration to deal with our own disturbing emotions. So for example, if I'm getting really angry at somebody, and if I think of Tara, and just ask Tara's help, please help me be patient in this moment. Please help me deal with this situation. Or ask myself, what would you do in this situation? What would Tara do in this situation? So those are some things we can do that are quite practical and help us deal with those kind of situations where our mind gets caught up in afflictive emotions. And somebody asked a question, somebody sent a question that I thought to answer at this point, because it does kind of connect with what we're talking about here. The question is, I may have missed something in your talks, but would you outline why emptiness is the antidote to our suffering? What happens that makes this so? So I apologize if I didn't explain this. Maybe I just assumed everybody knows that. It's just so obvious. But I guess that's not so. If you haven't fully made a deep study of Buddha's teachings, and especially the Lam Rim, the stages of the path to enlightenment. So in the Buddhist teachings, for example, in the Four Noble Truths and also in the Lam Rim, those stages of the path to enlightenment, we learn about what's called samsara, or cyclic existence. This is an English translation of that. And another way of saying it is unenlightened existence. That means when we are not enlightened, we are not liberated, we are still caught up in confusion and ignorance, disturbing emotions, and so on. So this is the situation probably most of us are in. I know I'm still in. And as long as we're in this situation, we are never completely free. It's a bit like being on a Ferris wheel that never stops, because we keep going around again and again and again through a cycle of dying and being reborn, living, and then again begin dying and being reborn over and over and over again without any choice or control. And in each life, each time we are born, we experience all kinds of problems, myriad different problems. For example, the sufferings of birth, and then aging, sickness, death, not getting what we want, getting what we don't want, losing what we don't want to lose, and yeah, just all the sufferings that come with having a body and mind that are still bound up by karma and afflictions, afflictive emotions. So Buddha spoke about that in his very first teaching. He pointed out the suffering, the truth of suffering that we all are subject to. And then he went on to explain the cause of suffering. The cause of suffering are the afflictive emotions, especially ignorance. Of all the different afflictive emotions or afflictive states of mind, ignorance is the main one. It's like the root of all the others, like a root of a tree from which grow the trunk, the branches, leaves, everything comes from the root. So in the same way, all afflictive emotions and all suffering and problems come from this mental state of ignorance, specifically ignorance that believes in things to be truly existing or inherently existing. So it doesn't see the things the way they are, but sees things in a false way, in a mistaken way. Because things don't exist that way. Things don't exist inherently or truly, but our mind is sort of clouded by this ignorance, causing us to see things in that way. And we don't know any better. We just go along with that appearance and buy into it and believe in it. And then, based on having this wrong or perverse way of seeing things, like we feel I am inherently existing. I am a real, solid, independently existing thing. And then we also see everybody else in the same way. All the other people, all the other beings, we see that we believe they also exist in that way. There's a real, inherently existing person over there. And the same with all the inanimate things in the world around us, both natural things and human-made things, all the things that happen, all the different events that happen, all the different situations that happen. So everything, absolutely everything, we see in this mistaken way, as if it has this real, solid, inherent way of existing, which it doesn't. But because of being under the influence of that ignorance, then other afflictions, other afflictive states of mind arise, such as, believing there's a real I. Then we tend to be kind of obsessed with our I, attached to our I. We feel arrogance, pride, conceit. I am so important. I'm so great. And also self-centeredness. There's this sense as if I am the center of the world. I'm the center of the universe. Everything revolves around me. My needs come first before everybody else's. I should always get what I want. Everybody should be nice to me. Nobody should be nasty to me, and so on. We have all these demands and expectations that we make of others and the world and so on. And then when people live up to our expectations, oh, that's a nice person. What a nice person. I like them so much. Will you be my friend? Will you stay close to me? Because they make me feel good. They do what I want. So that's where attachment comes from. Attachment, clinging. Yeah. The people we regard as nice, and they kind of fit our ideas and expectations and do what we want them to do and so on. They're ego pleasing. They please our ego. So we want to be close to them. We want to keep them close to us. So that's where attachment comes from. But then the people who aren't nice to us, who don't do what we want, who do the opposite to what we want, behave in ways we think are offensive or wrong or bad or whatever, towards them, we have aversion, dislike, annoyance, irritation, even hatred, even violent tendencies, aggressiveness. We might want to harm them. We might fantasize doing awful things to them. Okay, so that's another set of uh, mental states that we can get caught up in. So it's basically attachment and aversion arising from ignorance. So it's like ignorance is at the root, and then coming out from that, attachment and aversion. And Buddha said those are the three poisonous states of mind: ignorance, attachment, and aversion. Those are the three main causes of suffering. And we have them much of the time, especially attachment. I think that's more prevalent than anger. I mean, some people might be angry all the time, may have more anger than attachment, but I think most people probably have more attachment than anger. So that's really a big one. And in fact, that's what the Buddha said in his first teaching when he talked about the cause of suffering, the second noble truth. He said it's craving. And we usually say ignorance is the main cause of suffering. But I've heard the Dalai Lama explain that ignorance is the root, and then craving, clinging is the kind of the proximate cause, the more immediate cause for suffering. Gets us into a lot of trouble. So having these attitudes, then ignorance, and then attachment, and then aversion, and then lots of others branch out from there, like jealousy, arrogance, and so on. So then, under the influence of these states of mind, we act. We engage in action, sometimes harmful actions, or manipulative actions, or dishonest actions, and so on. That way we create karma. When we create negative karma, unwholesome karma, then seeds are left in our mind that, if they're not purified, if they're not counteracted, become the cause for suffering and problems later on. Most of the time, most of the karma we create doesn't bring its result in the same lifetime, but in the next life or some later life. So our mind goes from life to life, carrying all these seeds or imprints of the actions that we've done under the influence of ignorance, greed, hatred, and so on. And that's where our suffering comes from. Those are the causes of our suffering. So it's all rooted in ignorance. Yeah, it all starts with ignorance. I'm kind of abbreviating this, but it's really good to learn the Lamrim, to study that, because that explains all these points in much more detail. So ignorance is our number one enemy, our number one problem. And the understanding of emptiness is the antidote to ignorance. In fact, it's the only antidote. There are other antidotes we can use to decrease our afflictive emotions. For example, developing loving kindness and compassion can decrease anger and self-centeredness and so on. So that really helps to cool down that emotion. Meditating on impermanence helps to cool down attachment. So there are antidotes that help to decrease the afflictive emotions, but those antidotes don't overcome ignorance. And the only thing that overcomes ignorance is the wisdom of emptiness, because that's the exact opposite of ignorance. The way ignorance sees things and the way the wisdom of emptiness sees things are totally opposite. So it's only the wisdom of emptiness that can knock out, overcome ignorance. And when that is overcome, all the other afflictive emotions and the karma and the suffering, the whole thing, not immediately like that, but gradually over time, we can overcome all these problems and suffering. So a quotation from Aryadeva, who was another of the great Nalanda masters and follower of the Prasangika school, in his text called The 400 Stanzas, he said, "When ignorance is destroyed, all afflictions are destroyed." And they say it's like, if you imagine a tree, And it's a poisonous tree, a harmful tree that's causing a lot of problems. So you want to get rid of this tree. If you just chop off the branches, they'll just grow again. As long as the root is there, then more branches will grow, more leaves will grow, more problems will come. So if you want to completely get rid of this tree, you need to uproot it. You need to get out the root so that there will be no more poisonous branches and leaves and so forth. So in the same way, ignorance is the root, and from that grows the other disturbing emotions, attachment, anger, and so on and so forth. And they will just keep coming, keep growing in our mind until we uproot ignorance. We remove ignorance from our mind. So I hope that makes it clear why it's so important to understand emptiness. Yeah. And there was another question that's kind of related to this too. This is from Stephen. He asked, are the qualities of an object, for example, attractiveness or ugliness, unattractiveness of another human body, which can lead to afflictions, are those qualities conventional truths, or are only the objects themselves conventional truths, and then those qualities are just projected by our mind onto them? So I was kind of intrigued by this question. And so I looked up some material that I had from the master's program, actually, because I remembered, oh yeah, I think I skipped over that. Yeah, in the Madhyamika Avatara by Chandrakirti, that's a text mainly about the perfection of wisdom. It does talk about other things, but most of it is about the perfection of wisdom. And in Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary to that text, which is called Illumination of the Thought, he gives an explanation of the process whereby ignorance gives rise to afflictive emotions, which is quite helpful. So I'll just summarize that. He says, first of all, phenomena are conceived to be truly existent or inherently existent. So we see things as inherently existent. That's the first step. And then a mental factor called improper attention. Improper attention is like obsessiveness. You know, when you get obsessed, your mind just gets stuck on an object and keeps thinking about it again and again and again. So that particular mental factor superimposes things as either attractive or unattractive, and tends to build up, exaggerate the attractiveness, the unattractiveness of objects. And so then we end up having conceptions about things, objects of our five senses, things we see, sounds that we hear, odors that we smell, tastes, tangible sensations in our body. So we conceptualize, this one is attractive, this one is unattractive. I like this one, I don't like that one. And it's from there that come attachment and aversion. So there's kind of a process starting with ignorance, and then this obsessiveness, exaggerating objects, exaggerating their qualities, and then from there, attachment and aversion. So I was looking at a transcript where this topic was being explained, and the Geshe who was explaining it, Geshe Jamba Gyatso, a student asked him a question, and in his reply he said, an object itself has some kind of attractiveness, but due to improper mental attention, we exaggerate its attractiveness. So the question is there nothing at all in the object itself, and it's only our mind imposing attractiveness and unattractiveness? And he said, no, there is some attractiveness there, but it's exaggerated by our improper mental attention. Also, I found another passage when we were studying the ornament for clear realization, and we were learning about a particular kind of practice that bodhisattvas do, and also hearers and solitary realizers. So this is based on, a very highly developed mind. They're able to emanate different forms, and they will sometimes emanate beautiful ones, sometimes ugly ones. And it's done to help other beings, like to help other beings, but also themselves to overcome attachment and aversion. So after talking about this, our teacher, Geshe Tenpel, said, or he asked us, are there attractive or unattractive forms? And one student said, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. This is what we tend to think. No, the object isn't attractive from its own side. It's only how it's seen by people. And then Geshe-la said, so are you saying that attractiveness and unattractiveness are just a matter of the mode of appearance to a certain person? What about the sutra citation that says, from giving wealth, from ethics, a good migration, from patience, an attractive appearance? That's sutra says, if you practice patience in a future life, you'll be born with an attractive appearance. So doesn't that seem to say that, there is some attractiveness there in the object? So he said, yeah, from practicing patience, one will obtain an attractive appearance. And this attractive appearance is posited from the point of view of the mode of appearance to the world. So it's still relative, it's still conventional. What one group of people find attractive, another might not find attractive, and vice versa. So it's still relative and conventional, but there is some kind of conventionally existing attractiveness there. So his conclusion, what he said was, from the mundane or worldly point of view, we can say that there is attractiveness and unattractiveness. But from the super-mundane point of view, like the ultimate point of view, there is no distinction between attractiveness and unattractiveness. And I was thinking too, when we are, in the teachings about making offerings, we're supposed to offer beautiful things, attractive things. So if there was no such thing as attractiveness, how would we know what is attractive and what is not? If it's only a question of our mind, saying this is attractive, and then it becomes attractive. So then we could take some old moldy food, and say, I impute this as attractive and I offer it to the Buddha. So that, I don't think that would be appropriate. So anyway, I'm just throwing these things out because I thought it's kind of an interesting question. And it does seem to me that, yeah, we can say it's all relative, not ultimately existing or inherently existing, but conventionally. We can say there is attractiveness and there is unattractiveness. But then the problem is our mind tends to exaggerate, to build up, to make something more attractive than it really is. Take an ordinary human body and make it into a god or a goddess and just be totally infatuated and, oh, this person will make me so happy forever and ever and ever. Or the other side, an ordinary human body and seeing it as unattractive, but then exaggerating the unattractiveness to the point where you just feel disgusted and averse and you can't even stand looking at that person. So that's something we have to look out for. And, this whole teaching on emptiness, looking into an object and trying to find this seemingly inherently existing person or seemingly inherently existing attractiveness or inherently existing unattractiveness. Okay, so that becomes a very good antidote to these tendencies. I don't know, does this make sense, or is there any objection or question or other point of view?
But we also have people who does not think that the Buddha is very wonderful. So conventionally, he is not very attractive to some people.
Yeah, that's true. But I think that's not so much talking about attractiveness. I mean, it could be. Some people might think, oh, he's ugly or something like that. But uh, it seems like you're talking more about the qualities of a Buddha. But perhaps that person doesn't really know, doesn't really understand what those qualities are. I mean, it's the same with the Dalai Lama. You know, Venerable Jigme was saying the other day, sometimes she reads the comments that people make, people write under the YouTube videos of His Holiness, and sometimes they're horrible. I mean, we have so much devotion to His Holiness. We're so happy to see him and listen to him and think about him and so on. But there are people who have very different views. So yeah, I mean, among human beings, there's all kinds of different ways of seeing things. And that's not our job to change people. We have to just look at our own mind and try to use our intelligence, think about things, and not just go along with what other people say or what's popular, what's conventional, but think for ourselves about what is good and what is not good, what is true and not good. You know that sutra, the Kalama Sutra? Have you heard of that one? Oh, I had it here somewhere. It's a nice story. Did you want to say something? Okay, well, there was the Buddha once came to this place where there were, I don't know, a group of people. I don't know if it's their ethnic group or their town or whatever. They were called the Kalamas. And when the Buddha arrived there, the people came out to see him and kind of said, "We're confused. There's all these spiritual teachers who come to our place and teach us. And, you know, they're all teaching their own doctrine and they're saying, this is true, you should believe this. And these doctrines are all different. So how do we know which one is right, which one is true?" So the Buddha's reply is, he said, "It's good for you to have doubt, to be uncertain. Uncertainty has arisen in you about what is doubtful." And then he proceeds to tell them how to determine if something is right or wrong, good or bad, true or false. He said, "Do not go upon what has been acquired by repeated hearing." Just because something is repeated again and again and again doesn't necessarily mean it's true. Nor upon tradition. Something's been handed down for many generations, for many centuries, and you've learned that. So that doesn't necessarily mean it's true. Nor upon rumor, something that people are talking about. Nor upon what is in a scripture, so holy books. You know, many people, it's a holy book. Whatever it says must be true. Don't question it. Nor upon surmise, which I think just supposition, guess. Nor upon an axiom. I guess that's like a saying. Nor upon specious reasoning, which means like superficial, not going very deep. Nor upon a bias toward a notion that has been pondered over. So you may have thought about something, but you have a kind of bias towards, oh, I like that one. I like that idea. So I think I'll go with that one. Nor upon another's seeming ability. Okay, so you know that sometimes there's teachers who have a very charismatic personality and are very eloquent and seem to have fantastic qualities. So you might be, you know, caught up in the emotion of being impressed by this person and think, oh, whatever they say must be true. Nor upon the consideration the monk is our teacher. You know, just because somebody is your teacher, then you have to believe whatever they say. So he said, don't go on those things. Instead, when you yourselves know these things are bad, these things are blamable, these things are censured by the wise, these things lead to harm and ill, abandon those. So when you can see for yourself that something is harmful, wrong and bad, abandon that. And then on the other hand, when you yourselves know these things are good, these things are not blamable, these things are praised by the wise, undertaken and observed, these things lead to benefit and happiness, enter on and abide in them. So he's basically saying go by your own experience rather than all these other reasons for believing in something or following somebody. So, I mean, you can notice here, he's not saying, oh, this teacher is bad, this teacher is bad, what that person says is wrong. He's not saying any of that. He's just saying, you check up yourself. Check yourself what is right for you. And don't worry so much about what other people are saying and doing. I like that anyway. So, Venerable Nima.
I just want to say that it's a little bit hard for me to wrap my head around the notion that there is attractiveness from the side of an object. Because if there were attractiveness from the side of an object, then it would follow that everyone would see the attractiveness of an object, and that's not the case.
Well, he didn't say there's attractiveness from the side of the object. He did say, from the mundane point of view, we can say that there is attractiveness and unattractiveness. So in terms of the world convention. But saying it's from the side of the object means it's inherently there. And when we look into that object, we will find that attractiveness existing all by itself, independently. Whereas my understanding is from the Prasangika point of view, yeah, there's some attractiveness there. And I mean, generally, probably most people would agree a particular person is attractive, or a particular sound or taste is attractive. Some people may not like it, but many people do. But when you look for that attractiveness, what you'll find is it doesn't exist inherently. It's dependent on causes and conditions. It only came about because many different factors, causes and conditions, and parts. So using those three different ways of checking things in existing dependently and also mentally labeled. It's labeled that way. Also, there's another factor that's sometimes used when thinking about how things are dependent, and that is relative. You know, like there's no inherently existing tall, because it all depends on who you're comparing it to. I'm tall when I stand next to a person who's shorter than me, but when I stand next to someone taller than me, then I'm short. So the same could be said also with beauty and unattractiveness.
Yeah, those are precisely the same reasons why I have a hard time thinking that there is attractiveness from the side of an object.
Yeah. But then, like I said, then there's this problem of these scriptures that say, if you practice patience, you will be born with an attractive body. How do you deal with that?
In my mind, it would mean that people will find you attractive. Doesn't mean that there's an attractiveness from the side of an object, but because of their practice, then people will have people's mind would be affected in such a way as to consider that attractive.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that's what he was saying. He said this sutra citation says that from practicing patience, one will obtain an attractive appearance, and this attractive appearance is posited from the point of view of appearance to the world. So people will see you as attractive. I don't know, I'm just, you know, I found it an intriguing question, and I just wanted to come up with some. These are just the things that I came up with as answers to it. Venerable Kunga.
So based on what Venerable Pema asked, there are some people who don't like the Buddha. We could take any other person, like a politician. There's a group of people who hate that politician. They see all these negative qualities. And then there's another group that loves the politician. They see all these positive qualities. So is it the case that there can be two opposite conventional truths, but they're still both conventional truths?
I think that, yeah, I think that's what Stephen was asking. Are the qualities conventional truths, or is just the object itself, like that person, there are 5 aggregates, okay, that's a conventional truth. And then is the likability or unlikability that people see in that person, are those conventional truths too, or are they only projected by the mind? So I'm not sure. I've just pulled out these quotations from a couple of my teachers and what they said about it. And both of them did say there is some attractiveness there, but then there's exaggeration from the side of people's minds, adding more than what's there.
But doesn't it, because it exists, attractiveness is a conventional truth, pure and simple, right? It doesn't make it true,
Yeah,
but it is a phenomenon. It is a conventional phenomenon. It
seems-
exists conventionally, so it has to
it
be a
seems to
conventional
be.
truth.
It seems to be,
Yeah.
yeah.
But that doesn't mean that it's a
Absolute truth.
absolute truth.
No, not absolute. Well, I mean, nothing is absolute. Nothing on the absolute level. Only emptiness is true. So on the conventional level, we can say there's attractiveness and unattractiveness. I don't want to spend the whole time talking about this. I would just, like I say, the question came up. I was intrigued by it. I pulled out some, quotations that might be an answer to it. But maybe we just put it aside for now. We can think about it and come back to it later. So let's move on. We were going through the 8 dangers or fears. So we got up to number 4, and now let's do number 5. So 5 is thieves. That's the outer danger. And the inner one is wrong views. Okay, so the verse says, roaming the fearful wild of inferior practice and the barren wastes of absolutism and nihilism, they sack the towns and hermitages of benefit and bliss, the thieves of wrong views. Please protect us from this danger. So, in the Buddhist explanation of the mind, and specifically the mental factors, all the different mental factors that we could have in our mind, there's one group that are called the 6 root afflictions. These are the main afflictive states of mind that cause our mind to be disturbed, unpeaceful, unhappy, and also mess up our lives. They lead us to engage in unwholesome actions and so on. So those are the main causes of suffering, and they are ignorance, anger, attachment, pride or arrogance, doubt, and wrong views. So this one here, wrong views, is one of these 6 root afflictions. Sometimes it's also called perverse views or afflictive views. So these are, beliefs, we could say, beliefs that we might hold for various reasons, like the ones that the Buddha just went through, sometimes because we learned them from somebody else, from a holy book, they're handed down by tradition, or maybe we just thought them up ourselves. It's also possible that just thinking on our own, we came up with certain views about things. So there could be various reasons for why we would hold these views. Um, and in general, they're said to be, the definition of afflictive views is it's an afflictive intelligence. So there's a certain amount of intelligence there because some thinking was involved, some analysis was involved, but it was afflicted. It was not like correct and wise and skillful, but kind of a, perverse way of thinking. And then there are 5 different versions or 5 different types of afflictive views. So I'll go through these, and it's good to check if we have any of these. In fact, we do, even though we may not do so intentionally. But like the first one, it's sometimes translated as view of the transitory collection, which is actually a literal translation of the Tibetan term. But in Venerable's books, the Library of Wisdom, Library of Wisdom and Compassion, it's called View of a Personal Identity. So this is like this morning we were looking at our sense of I and trying to recognize how we see our I as existing inherently, independently, and so on. So that's what this view is about. This view of personal identity is believing that our I, our own self, our I, is inherently existing. And there's actually 2 parts to it. One is the I, just the sense of I, and the other is mine. So when we have a sense of ownership of things like my clothes, my computer, but also our own body, my mind, my eyes, and so on. So when the I plays the role of an owner, a possessor of something, then that's the mine. So whether it's just I or it's mine, this view sees the I as something existing inherently, independently, a real objective thing existing on its own. It grasps at that. And again, it's considered to be an afflictive intelligence because there is some analysis going on there. I do exist. I am real. So this is something we all have. And in fact, not only human beings, even animals, all sentient beings, they have this. Even babies, when they're first born, have this sense of personal identity, belief in an inherently existing I. We have it because we had it in past lives. And so we just continue. As soon as we're born, as soon as we come into a new life, that's already there in our mind. So it's a very long, old, long-term habit in our mind. And it's wrong, it's mistaken. So, so this learning about emptiness and meditating on emptiness, trying to check to see if our I does exist in that way or not. That's the remedy to that particular wrong view. And then the second type of wrong view or afflictive view is view of extremes. So there are 2 of these. One is called, sometimes it's called permanence or absolutism, or what are some other translations of that? Reification. The other one is nihilism. There aren't too many alternatives to that term. So these are called 2 extremes and extreme views. So absolutism, well, each Buddhist school has a different way of explaining absolutism, what that is, but in the Prasangika school, it's grasping at inherent existence. So yeah, permanence is another one, another way it's called. So it's when we see things, people and beings and things and so on, and believe that they exist inherently, truly, from their own side. So it's a reification. It's adding on something that isn't there, seeing a way of existence that is actually false. The other extreme is nihilism, and that is where we deny the existence of things that do exist. So that sometimes happens when people learn about emptiness and do a little bit of study, a little bit of thinking, a little bit of meditation on emptiness, and they end up thinking emptiness means nothing exists at all. There is no I, there's no sentient beings, there's no world, there's no good, no bad, nothing exists. So that's nihilism. And it's said to be quite dangerous because if you could end up mentally ill. I tell you, when I first went to Dharamsala, I didn't actually meet this person, but I just heard people talking about her. She was a Western woman who had been there for a while and learned some Buddhism and did some meditation. And she ended up in this state of mind where she really believed, she was totally convinced nothing exists. I don't exist, nothing else exists. And she just became like a vegetable. She was just sitting there, didn't take care of herself, didn't eat, didn't do anything. So she had to be taken to a mental hospital, sent home, something like that. So it does happen. Yeah, it does happen to people that they make that mistake. So they say that's worse than the other one. Nihilism is worse than absolutism or permanence. Not only because of the mental problems that can come, but also thinking there's no karma. Apparently some people, they make that mistake. Karma doesn't exist, so I can do whatever I want. Then they may create bad karma and just create more suffering for themselves. So that's another kind of wrong view. Either reifying or exaggerating or believing in something that doesn't actually exist, or denying the existence of things that do exist. Okay, another wrong view is called the view of rules and practices. So this is an afflictive intelligence that believes purification of mental defilements occurs by engaging in ascetic practices and inferior codes of ethical conduct that are inspired by wrong views. So at the time of Buddha, and I think still today, there are people in India who have certain views about practices, sometimes ascetic practices. For example, there's one horrible one I've heard about. I don't know if anybody ever does this anymore, but they call it the 5 fires. So you build 4 bonfires in the 4 directions, and then you sit in the middle of them, and the 5th fire is the sun. So you sit under the hot sun with these 4 fires around you. And I guess the idea is just endurance. Yeah, if you can endure this, you'll somehow gain high realizations or liberation or whatever. And then lying on a bed of nails, standing on one leg continuously, day and night. I mean, yeah, these kind of practices. So the idea is if you do these practices, your mind will attain freedom, liberation, high states of mind, or whatever. So those are examples of this kind of wrong view, that these kind of practices will really benefit you. So the Buddha, said, no, that's not the way you change your mind. You change your mind internally. Another practice is washing in the Ganges River. The belief that if you go in the Ganges River and bathe yourself, you'll purify your sins, your bad karma, your defilements, and so on. And there's a story about Chandrakirti, where he wanted to kind of confront people who had this view. So he went down to the Ganges River, and people were there, washing, bathing, and getting rid of their sins. And he had a chamber pot, you use for going to the bathroom. So it's all yucky inside. So he went down to the river and took some of the water, and he's scrubbing the outside of the pot, not the inside, the outside. He's scrubbing the pot. So some other, I guess a Brahmin was looking at him and saying, "What are you doing? You shouldn't clean the outside of the pot. You should clean the inside of the pot. That's where the yuck is. That's where the mucky stuff is." And so he says, "Well, it's the same with you. You're washing your body, and you think you can get rid of the sins inside your mind just by washing your body." So yeah, that's the Buddhist view, that if you want to get rid of your sins, you can't wash them away by water, even the holy water of the Ganges River. And I was wondering, maybe a modern day version of this might be taking drugs as a spiritual path. Yeah. There was an article last year in one of the Buddhist magazines about certain Buddhist teachers, certain Buddhist centers who bring people together, and then they take different kinds of drugs, hallucinatory drugs, or what's that one from South America? Ayahuasca, something like that, and they go on trips together as spiritual practice. So, I don't know. I think from the Buddhist point of view, that would not be the proper way to bring about a transformation of your mind. But anyway, these are just some examples of practices that people might engage in, hoping and thinking and wishing that they would be able to transform their minds, purify the afflictions, the karma, the causes of suffering, and bring about mental transformation. Okay, then. Another wrong view is just called wrong views. And this is an afflictive intelligence that denies the existence of something that in fact does exist. For example, karma. If you say there's no such thing as karma, there's no such thing as doing an action now and experiencing a result later. If you deny that, or if you deny past lives and future lives, no such thing, that's impossible. You deny the three jewels, that there's such a thing as a Buddha, enlightened being, such a thing as the Dharma, such a thing as the Arya Sangha, who have true paths and true cessations. So those would be examples of denying things that do exist. Another kind of wrong view would be believing in the existence of something that in fact doesn't exist. So from the Buddhist point of view, that would be like a creator of the universe, a creator of the world, some divine being who has created all of this, or some of the non-Buddhist schools attributed creation to something called a primal substance, that there's this primal substance that transforms into everything in the world, all the beings, all the things, and so on. So these are examples of wrong views. Denying the existence of something that does exist, or believing in the existence of something that doesn't exist. And then the fifth kind of wrong view is holding wrong views as supreme. So this is an afflictive intelligence that regards other afflictive views as the best views. So if you hold one of these other views, like views of rules and practices or wrong views or extreme views, you hold that view and you regard it as very precious, very sacred, very, very wonderful. This is the best view of all. Then that becomes another kind of wrong view. So the remedy here would be just to check up. Mama Yeshi always used to say that, check up. So whatever kind of thoughts we have, views, ideas, beliefs about things, investigate if they are true or not, if they are beneficial or not. So I think this is common when we start to learn Buddhism, and some of the Buddhist teachings we might find them very pleasant and agreeable. Yes, I like that, I agree with that. But other things might, well, we find them jarring and push our buttons, trigger our emotions, irritate us. We kind of think, oh, I wish that wasn't there. I wish the Buddha didn't teach that. I was like that when I was starting to learn Buddhism. There was so much I really liked, but then they started talking about the hell realms, and I thought, oh no, not again. I thought I left that one behind. So I really struggled with that. So actually that kind of thing is helpful, because it does show us what kind of views we do have, what kind of beliefs we do have, what we need to look at. So then we need to ask ourselves, okay, like in my case, why do I not want there to be hells? And why do I think the world, the universe should be hell-free? And can I prove that there is no such, I want there to be no hells, but can I be sure that there is no such thing as hell? Yeah, can I, make the universe the way I want it to be? So it just made me think about that, question that, and then that's very good. Like the Dalai Lama says, it's very good for us to have doubts. Not to get stuck in our doubts, but to investigate, what do I believe? What do I think? And why? Why do I think that way? Do we have good reasons, valid reasons for what we think or what we believe? Or is it just because this is how I want things to be, or this is what all my friends say, or this is what my mother said, or, often our reasons are not very good, not very solid. So this is something that takes time, not necessarily overnight you'll be able to change your mind and be free of wrong views, but it can be very problematic. It can keep us stuck, unable to move forward, unable to grow, and can create other problems in our life as well. Maybe I can stop and leave time for questions. Any questions from any of you, or microphone?
In our afternoon discussion, we had a bit of a discussion. Is there something like a reasonable anger? So it goes a little bit off what you were taking, but maybe coming back to it. We didn't have a final conclusion, but it was good to think about it, because you mentioned reasonable and unreasonable anger was, you quoted in the book Beyond Religion. Mm-hmm. And I mean, when I thought about it, then I did not come up with anger itself, rather with certain force that comes from clarity, that is in accord, for example, with the Dharma. Yeah.
Sorry?
For me, when I answered the question myself, I had rather thought about not as a form of anger, reasonable anger, but rather as yeah, just reason, clarity, and so that form of clarity may come a certain force that, yeah, may come across as anger, but it's not meant as such. So I don't know if you have a little bit more to share about this statement.
Yeah, I was just checking back to the quotation from His Holiness. He didn't actually use the word reasonable. Maybe I did, I don't know. Yeah. He just said anger isn't always destructive. In some situations, strong compassion may give rise to an equally strong sense of outrage. So maybe you could interpret that to be reasonable anger. There's kind of a good reason, like if you see somebody doing something really harmful, causing suffering to others, and you feel, this is wrong, this should stop. There is a good reason there, and it's based on compassion. You don't want to see people being harmed. But reasonable anger. I'm just thinking a long time ago, Lama Yeshe once said, there's never any good reason to get angry. That stayed in my mind for a long time. But yeah, it's debatable anyway. It's debatable. Is there such a thing as reasonable anger? But nevertheless, it does exist. It does happen to us. And I think we have to reach quite a high level of the path to not have anger coming up in our mind. But at least if we can understand that if we let ourselves get caught up in anger and then act out our anger in our words, our actions, or even just, getting stuck in our mind, that's not helpful for us and not helpful for anybody else. And instead, cool down. The way I think of it is like cool down the anger and try to tap into the energy, because there is a lot of energy there to do something, to bring about change. So try to tap into that energy and use that energy, but use it with intelligence, because anger is not very intelligent. It tends to be just very reactive. And you bring your intelligence in and think, okay, there's this situation, this is going on. What can I do about it to bring a solution? So then bring your intelligence, your energy together to do something constructive. So is that what you were asking? Yeah. Like, I don't know, one story I heard was a woman in California, I think, her child was killed by somebody driving under the influence of alcohol, drunk driver. And apparently that happens a lot. And she was mad. She was angry, understandably. But she transformed her anger into something constructive. She started this organization, which is called MADD, MADD, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, or drunk driving, or something like that. And they lobbied to bring about changes in the law. And I think it was successful. As I heard, they were successful in reducing the incidence of people being killed and harmed due to drunk driving. So that's an example of, doing something constructive, not just sitting home and being angry and swearing and screaming and, but let's bring about changes.
Someone asks, would it be appropriate to transmute the current attachment we have to human beings to attaching to Tara for refuge? I'm not sure attachment to Tara is the correct word in English, but I couldn't think of another one.
So transforming or transmuting attachment we have to people to taking refuge in Tara. Well, I mean, when I'm teaching, people often ask about attachment to teachers, for example, spiritual teachers. I guess it could also apply to deities. You could get very attached to some deity. And I tend to think, it's very hard to be free of attachment. Again, it's going to be with us for a long time until you realized emptiness. And so we can't just immediately stop having attachment. but if we can at least, yeah, I'm not recommending having attachment to teachers or to deities, but if we are going to have attachment, that's a healthier kind of attachment, because at least those beings present a healthy and wholesome, beneficial appearance to us, and will guide us and teach us. Because if we have attachment to teachers and to deities and so on, then we're going to be much more likely to pay attention to them and listen to them and follow them, and that will be good for us. That will be taking us in the direction of liberation and enlightenment. And as we are going in that direction, following the path, practicing what our teachers have taught us, we will overcome our attachment. If we're really working on ourselves, really, applying mindfulness and the methods for working on our disturbing emotions, our attachment will decrease and eventually we'll overcome it. So, if we're going to be attached to anything, it is better to be attached to the Dharma, to the teachers, to the deities, and so on. As long as we recognize that that attachment isn't healthy, isn't something to be fed and increased and encouraged, but, something I do need to overcome. Is that answering the question, I think? And then devotion. I mean, we're encouraged to have faith, devotion, which can be a little similar to attachment, because it does cause us to sort of focus on and be attentive to and be connected with someone or something. And as long as it's something healthy and wholesome and, helping us progress along the path, then that will be beneficial for us, and working on decreasing attachment as we go.
I had heard an explanation. I could have understood it wrongly, but when Geshe was saying it is not possible to have attachment to an enlightened being, because there's no way you can exaggerate their good qualities.
Yes. I remember Geshe Tashi Tsering and Chenrezig saying that too. Because when you look at the definition or the explanation of attachment or desire or whatever it's called, it does contain an element of exaggeration, that you're focusing on some, and it's usually also with regard to some samsaric object, something within samsara, something contaminated or polluted, samsaric. So that's the object of attachment. And then you exaggerate the attractiveness of the object and make it much more wonderful than it is. So yeah, they do say that it's not possible to have attachment to a Buddha or to Tara, because for one thing, they're not samsaric object, and we can't really exaggerate them because they already have all the good qualities that there are. We can't superimpose or exaggerate anymore. So that's kind of a technical explanation, but I think it is still possible to, get kind of clingy and maybe also have another thing that happens with attachment is we can have unrealistic expectations, so that could happen with teachers, it could happen with deities, with practices and so on. So we should stop there for today, and a lot to think about and continue discussing tomorrow. So now,
one addition to the story about the mother who started Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, that although her initial reaction was the anger, the motivator for her to start this organization was because she didn't want any other family to go through that. So there was really a strong element of compassion.
Yeah, I think that's often the case when there's this outrage about some injustice or abuse or bad things happening. It's very much connected with compassion.